Hello everyone, back again in my studio. And it's that time of year when I start to get ready for open studios, which here in the Bay Area is in May. So I have a lot of my paintings and mixed media pieces in the process of getting framed and ready to go for that. But one of the things that I like to do for open studios, because there are a lot of people that come through my studio here that don't have a lot of money to spend on art, or they have no wall space left in their house, or for whatever reason, don't like the larger pieces. So I try to come up with some ideas of some art or some things that I can sell that are more usable, but also a better price point for people that want to come out and support us artists, but may not have hundreds of dollars to spend on a painting. So one of the things I'm doing this year is I'm taking my mini collage idea and creating coasters. I've been doing some collage on some. You'll see they're really, really interesting as small pieces with the small pieces of paper. So these are almost like mini collages. The normal ones I do are about 5.5 to 6 inches, and these are working now small on 4 inches. So I'm going to do more of those. The other thing I've done is I've actually done some painted coasters, and these I actually use a stencil to get this pattern on, and I use some metallic paints for that as well. Coasters just come as just plain white coasters uncoated. For the collage ones, I generally just put a layer of matte medium on there just to seal them up a little bit. For the painted ones, depending on what color I'm painting them, I sometimes just use white gesso. And then once these are done and dried, I put a gloss varnish on them, generally 2 coats. And then most of the coasters come with these little cork backing pieces that you put on. Okay, so the first set I'm going to do are going to be a couple that are going to be in the collage format. So I have my Liquitex matte medium here, and I haven't really noticed that there's a side to these coasters, and I'm just going to coat these with a thin coat just to seal them up. And I just use a nice big kind of 1-inch flat brush, soft brush. All right, so we're gonna have to let those dry. Okay, so for the ones that I'm actually going to paint, and I just use acrylic paint, I just put a coating of gesso on there, and again, I just have the white artist gesso. And I want to try to get this on there as smooth as I can. So you can use a color shaper, which gives you a nice flat coating, or just a really, really soft brush. So I kind of get it on there. And I have a piece of palette paper that I put this on so that it doesn't stick as it dries. You can also use white acrylic paint, which will take less time to dry. Gesso generally takes a little bit longer to dry. So it just depends on how long you want to wait. So that's going to dry now as well. Okay, so now these that I coated with the matte medium are dry, and I can start putting my collage papers on there. So one thing about these I've discovered when you do use the collage papers is that you want to stay with the thin ones. So I'm just going to use the deli paper probably and the tissue paper. I'm not going to use any of the heavier papers because I want this to be completely smooth. And if you use different weight papers, then you end up with kind of little bumps in here. And this is a coaster, so you're going to be having a glass set on it. So you want to make sure that it stays as flat as you can. So I really liked this design. Like, I liked these colors and these pieces. So I thought I would do at least another set with those or something similar. So, so I pulled all of those pieces that I had. And I've got my little cup here with my matte medium. Now you could use gloss medium or satin medium or even glazing medium. All right, let me move these out of the way. So I picked a few pieces I wanted to start with for this one. I'm going to add this piece in. I don't have that on here. I have this as the pattern piece. The other thing I noticed is that you really only want to have one, maybe two if they're small pieces of something that's got a lot of pattern, and keep the rest of it fairly muted. They don't have to be solids. They could have, you know, color variations in them, but just not really strong patterns. But I liked this piece, and I thought I might try it to see if I could work it in. It doesn't have a lot of pattern on it. It just has some nice big, sort of big, bold marks. I also like that this is kind of in 3 sections with a little bit of overlap here. So I think I'll try to keep that in mind as well. And keep the busy part in the middle so I can overlap it with the edge pieces. And I've got that green, or I've got this with the, you know, it's got some stripes in it. Unfortunately, I don't have a bigger piece, but I might be able to go over that with a second piece. We'll see. And then I've got this other tissue paper that's semi-transparent because it's thin. And then I thought maybe I could just tuck this in. So I guess this could be more of an angle. And throw that piece in there. What if I flopped this over and went the other way? All right, so I just dug through my, plastic tub where I keep these, and I did find I have a little bit of this left. So I think what I will do then is see if I can add a little bit of this darker in here. And maybe I keep that pattern on this one. It's hard working this small because you just don't have a lot of space to put too many pieces in. Or I have this other dotted pattern. That might be interesting in there. I think that could work too. And tear out a section. And I think I need a longer, dark piece. So here's the other one that I put gesso on because I'm going to paint it. I did this one earlier when I was sort of testing out things, and I really liked it, so I wanted to do a matching one so that I have a set of two. And I actually used my stencil on this one, so I pulled that as well. So I'm going to start with basically just painting the base and letting that dry before I put the stencil on. And I believe I just used the cadmium orange and the cadmium yellow with just some sort of mixed colors on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and get that painted with those. Let's put that aside. And since I have the gesso on here, it should be, it should make this easy to paint so that the paint doesn't soak in. Now I'm just going to put some on here. I could throw it in my palette. And I'm not doing too thick a layer on here. Obviously I want to get it coated. And I want to keep it fairly random. So these were the colors I used, the cadmium orange and the cadmium yellow. And I also have this cadmium red light. So I think some of that may be in there as well. And then here's the other Joggles stencil that I used. And again, I don't know where the pattern is that I did there. Looks like it's right there. So I probably want to find a pattern in a different location. Maybe I like that this is a little bit more random with different sizes, so maybe I'll do It's hard because there's so many cool spots here. Maybe something like that. Let's run that one off. And then I think I won't do that one. So maybe I can move this over a little bit. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of mix a bunch of colors together and just start adding them on here. Now this one I didn't do as thick as the blue one I did on the metallic. You have to be careful because sometimes when you do this, you get paint on this side. And so if I put it back down there, it's going to get paint in the rest of those places. Okay, I think that's pretty good. It matches, matches this one. And you'll see here on this one, I didn't come back and smooth it with the brush. I just left that texture on there. So I think the texture on that one is fine as well. Okay, so now I'm just going to set those aside to dry. These are the two finished ones that I will come back and put a gloss varnish on the other ones to match these when they are dry. Okay, so I've had a chance to work on a couple of more sets of these collage coasters, and they're pretty much all dry and ready to be varnished. But what I do before I do that is check the edges on them. Like you'll see here's a edge that's not glued down, so I can either rip that off depending on where it is, or I can add some more matte medium to it and glue it down. So I've already gone through and done that. If there's any big gaps, I generally try to fill those in with another piece. So most of these are pretty clean, and these all are ready to go. So I just used the Liquitex gloss varnish. You could use any varnish that works on collage or acrylic. It's totally up to you. And then I have these two 1/2-inch really cheap kind of acrylic brushes that are fairly soft. When I do the final varnish coat, I really don't want to have any brush marks in it. So sometimes I start with my color shaper or do that at the end. I also sometimes tilt it to let the stuff run, just to sort of smooth out some of those edges. I also make sure that I have a piece of palette paper down, so the stuff is going to come around the edges. So you want to make sure that whatever it's sticking to, you're going to be able to pull it off without ripping everything up. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start by just putting a little bit of medium or varnish here, and then I'm just going to go through and do the sides first while I can pick up the coaster. If I do the top and then I try to pick it up to do the sides, it's like it gets all over my hands and messes up the varnish. So I generally just do the sides first on all of them. Just makes things go a little quicker and not quite as messy. And I'm putting it on fairly thick. I want to make sure that it's got a good coating on it. And these I let dry overnight. I let them have a nice long drying time. And then I generally stick a second coat on. And I generally do a second coat for a couple of reasons. One, because if there's a little bit of a texture to the surface, one coat isn't really going to cover that. And you'll still feel those, sort of bumps and uneven surfaces. Sometimes by adding a second coating of the varnish, it gets thick enough that you don't really see or feel those layers. Like here I did a few more layers of paper on here, and I can just see as I'm putting this on that I can see where those edges are. Now, that's not necessarily a huge problem. These are all relatively flat. I'm not worried about like something sliding off of it or sitting uneven. But I do want these as sort of flat as I can get them. So I'm just using the side of the brush to get as much on these as I can, leaving them fairly thick. I don't want stuff puddling necessarily. And I want to be careful so it doesn't sort of run over the edge and make a puddle on the edge and then dry with like a little, crusty bit on there. I see a little spot here where there's an edge sticking up. So I'm gonna see if I can get some varnish underneath there. And then I just kind of go around and clean up any drips. And then all I need to do is set this aside to dry and put the cork pads on the bottom.